What's up, YouTube? I'm here today to talk about a very important issue. If you didn't know, last weekend was TwitchCon, which is a really big convention where a bunch of the Twitch community, chatters, streamers, staff all come together and have a really great weekend together at a convention. And at the convention, it was in San Diego this year. I went, I had a great time. But as I was walking around the floor, there's a lot of these different booths where brands mostly pay Twitch and sponsor the convention so that they can set up a big booth. And some of them have games in them. Some of them are, just more kind of like ads with products that you can kind of demo and stuff. But there's one booth in particular that really caught my eye. One of the main sponsors of TwitchCon, Chevron. Yeah, so Chevron, the gas and oil company. If you don't know, there's going to be links in the bios for receipts on all of the terrible shit that Chevron is involved in. But in general, you just really all you need to know is that Chevron is really one of the worst companies in existence. I feel very confident being able to say that. On Friday of the convention, the very first day, we left the convention a little bit early, and immediately when we went outside, we were greeted by these protesters who are holding big signs that says, Chevron fuels genocide. As somebody who, if you can't tell, is somebody who's been fighting against Zionism and for the Palestinian people for a decade of my life, at least now, this was a really beautiful thing to see. And so I went out there with a bunch of other leftist streamers. We talked to the organizers for a little bit, and we asked them why they were doing this. And it turns out that San Diego BDS, which is the name of the organization that organized the boycott and organized the protests outside of TwitchCon, we're starting a week of action to challenge Chevron and to encourage people to boycott Chevron. And TwitchCon was their first action because as the main sponsor of TwitchCon, Chevron and Twitch were in this unholy partnership. And as a member of the Twitch community, somebody that streams on Twitch, please go follow me in the bio, this kind of bothered me. And I think this was a great opportunity for us to kind of talk about what do we want from this convention, what do we want from this community. And so as soon as I got home, I reached back out to San Diego BDS and asked them how the protests went, and I ended up having 4 of their organizers on my stream for an interview, which is going to be shown in the rest of this video. And I just think it's really important that we have a critical eye about how our communities engage with the world and what are the values that we want the Twitch community to have. And I think any kind of real conversation about that ends with Chevron doesn't belong there. And so I started this petition, on Twitch's own website where we can give feedback on Twitch as a platform. I started this petition to give people a space to express their opinion that Twitch should end their partnership with Chevron. There's so many different brands that Twitch could be partnering with. If you would like to, the link will be in the bio for that as well to sign that. Other than that, enjoy the rest of the video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content and want to see more of it. And follow me on Twitch, where we're doing this kind of coverage all the time of on-the-ground protest movements and, people doing really fucking sick organizing. So thank you so much. Isn't streaming on Twitch making money for Twitch? Nobody is asking you to boycott Twitch. I don't know if that's not unclear here. Nobody's asking you to boycott Twitch. We are asking Twitch to end their partnership with literally one of the most evil companies that exists. Actually, Chevron, you can't really get worse than Chevron. Even if you don't care about Israel, their complicity and their the shit that they do with fossil fuels and the pollution and just direct harm just on an unimaginable scale that Chevron causes. I'm doing what I can to highlight this because we saw the protests. We kind of went over and talked to the protesters that night, and we ended up having a 20-minute conversation with the protesters outside of TwitchCon. I decided I want to also do something that we can directly a direct ask with tonight's stream. So I wrote this on the Twitch forums or their user voice. I don't even know what this is. It took me forever to even find where to be able to post this. But if you think Chevron is an ass company and that Twitch should not be fueled by genocide, if you guys agree with this statement, I highly recommend you go vote on it. Leave a comment. I don't think we can really make that big of an impact, but if there's Twitch staff who could make this case to people at Twitch and just kind of be hey, what is the excuse actually? Are there really not any other companies besides Chevron to do this with. It was really easy for me to do. It's very easy for you to do, to go vote. It's like the least impactful thing you'll probably do today. It's just, it doesn't take you that much effort. All righty. We are expecting 3 people, I think, right?
Yeah. So it's just going to be 3 of us.
Mari is a student board member of the Palestine Solidarity Committee at the University of San Diego. She uses she, her pronouns, and she is of Syrian and Mexican descent. Welcome in, Mari. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Sparrow, would you like to give an introduction to your work?
Hi, I'm Fred Sparrow. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a faith-based environmental activist, and I'm Jewish. And my lines come from Poland, and then my non-Jewish side, French Canada. So I try to center North America in these conversations as well. Looks like we got Patrick joining us.
Hey, Patrick.
How's it going?
Good to see you.
Hello.
Welcome in. I kind of want to just give both of you the opportunity to kind of like explain how you entered into the work of doing like anti-apartheid and anti-Zionist like organizing and what brought you into that.
I've been doing anti-apartheid and environmental activism for the last 10 years, and I definitely entered into it through Standing Rock, through the Solidarity Network. I'm from the Midwest. That really opened my eyes to decolonization. And then from there, after Standing Rock fell, I became more involved with organizing around Palestine and drawing those parallels between our militaries.
So I've always been someone who cares a lot about decolonization as a Syrian person, as a Mexican person, as someone inhabiting occupied Kumeyaay land in the United States in San Diego. I find it's very important to work constantly towards decolonization in 1,000 ways. And starting at USD, I got involved with the Palestine Solidarity Committee through Mecha and Acha, which are 2 Chicano student activist movements. And we've worked in conjunction quite a bit. And yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so I do have the bios for you, Patrick. You're a videographer and member of San Diego BDS and OSIDers for Palestine. You spent 10 months lobbying the Oceanside City Council for a ceasefire resolution. Good work. 9 months organizing with BDS, and has spent several years writing and documenting social justice, human rights, and environmental issues.
We're still kind of gonna push the city council. We haven't given up yet. Just that I'm grateful to be part of this whole group. Everybody's so authentic and committed to the cause of human rights and Palestine and the environment too.
Yeah, for sure. If there's one thing that like being involved in organizations like this is, it's like a lot of the work of people. I always say on the stream, a lot of this work of like even just like paying attention and like keeping your heart and eyes and mind on what's happening in Gaza can be very overwhelming and exhausting, and despair is an emotion that's a very natural reaction. And to me, like one of the best ways to fight against that despair is to be in community with people who are also feeling that and get hope from each other and be recharged in that space. Cecile, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. First of all, just wanted to say thank you so much for having us on your stream to kind of elevate this issue of like why. I think most people on your stream probably know why we're fighting for Palestine, but specifically why we're boycotting Chevron. And as far as introducing myself, my name's Cecile, and I'm from San Diego. I've been here for 45 years, and one of the founders of the San Diego BDS chapter, and started my activism about 15 years ago, focusing on LGBT rights. That was kind of my main focus when I first got in it. Honestly, my first protest was right after 9/11. I'm old enough to have been in college when that happened. And our first protest was just demonstrating against the manufacturing of consent for war after 9/11. Just anti-war causes, LGBT causes, immigrant causes. As an immigrant myself, it's all connected.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the specific action at TwitchCon. So like what were your goals and any demands that you had with the action, and then also like how did it go? How was the experience of actually protesting there?
As far as specific goals, we only had maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks to plan it. So it was more about just having an impact and spreading the word, as far as, instead of they already had their sponsorship. We couldn't really have some kind of good faith conversation and ask them to drop the sponsorship. It was more about just getting the word out that Chevron sponsors TwitchCon, and they also sponsor genocide. So boycott Chevron, please. That was our became my, like, I repeated that probably 100, 200 times to people handing out flyers. So it was more about just awareness. We've been working on getting Chevron movement and actions going, but this is only like our second or third really action. It seems to have worked. We're lucky there was a big crowd, and some people were streaming, and they wanted to share our action with the public.
I will say too, it's a little odd to me when corporations who have so many literal skeletons in their closet to be so bold as to sponsor a major event like this, because it ends up being a giant opportunity for us to expose their complicity in so many human rights violations. Maybe Sparrow will touch on this a little bit due to their activism, fighting pipelines and defending indigenous rights. But Chevron has a very long, dirty history of extractivism, starting in the 80s in Ecuador. We watched as a BDS chapter in San Diego recently, just for our own education. And I recommend everybody check out this film called Crude, which just goes into the amount of like environmental devastation that Chevron was willing to leave behind in their wake when they extracted all of this oil in just a Delaware-sized portion of Ecuadorian indigenous land, completely covered in sludge. And now the babies and the mamas and all the people still to this day are suffering the consequences in terms of diseases, skin diseases, cancer, have very high death rates. And there's no real way to clean that up. I mean, the only way to not kill these people is to not make a mess in the first place. And so even though there's been this lawsuit, including a rather famous US attorney who helped take on the case, there's been this lawsuit to try and make Chevron pay. Chevron would rather pay more attorneys to fight the case than pay these people for the damages they've done. But also, there is no way to pay these people, right? There is no way that you can make it okay that you gave cancer to an 8-year-old child because of so that's just the sort of like old stuff. So
Right.
we have, there was somebody from TwitchCon who was Twitchy kind of gave us a shout, which we really appreciated. But as an indigenous person, and activist also, she's calling them out for all of the stuff, not just this most recent. And then in 2020, Chevron decided to get into business with Israel. And one of the things that led to the downfall of South African apartheid was a boycott of shell gas. Very similar. And so I would love it if this could be, the Chevron boycott could sort of act as a similar type of linchpin that maybe turns the tide. I mean, the Israeli economy right now is struggling, and unfortunately, it's the U.S. allowance, weekly allowance pay that we're that we're sending to this bully that's keeping the slaughter going. And so we have to turn off the tap. And one of the ways that we can do that is pay attention to big complicit organizations and expose them for their complicity so that we won't collaborate with them, and hopefully they'll get out. Hopefully Chevron would not be a sponsor of TwitchCon next year, and also hopefully Chevron will learn the lesson to get out of Israel, as Intel recently backed out of a business partnership that they were starting to get into, and they decided because they were going to be targeted for boycott and because the Israeli economy is failing, they got out. We want Israel to fail.
True. Yeah, I think a lot of people in the chat will agree with that. What was your like awareness of Twitch before the protests, and then like also like what kind of response did you get from people who were attending the convention who maybe didn't even know that Chevron was a sponsor, or had no idea why people would be protesting outside?
As one of the people bullhorning, generally I had an awareness of Twitch. I made an account in like freshman year of high school, and I know that it's a good platform for spreading information, and there are a lot of very famous Twitch streamers. And that it's a very, very good platform for getting people watching things and talking about things. But I'm also not the best, most qualified person to be talking about social media platforms,
Sure.
given the fact that I'm like technologically inept. But it was a very positive reaction. I think I didn't know what the general vibe was going to be. When San Diego BDS protested outside of Comic-Con, also because of sponsorships, it was a very odd reaction. A lot of people were very angry at us, and a lot of people were very much in support of us. And honestly, I didn't know enough about Twitch to be able to make an accurate, like, judgment about, like, this is what I think the vibe's going to be. This is what I know about the general population of Twitch users. Generally,
Right.
the audience at TwitchCon. But it was a very positive reaction for the most part. We had someone, I think, mime something quite lewd at us. We had people yell things at us, but many more people than that stopped and talked to us, asked questions, thanked us for doing this, asked who we were, asked how to get involved. There was someone standing with a donation link for someone they knew in Gaza, and people were scanning to donate. So many more people were being very kind and bringing this great positivity and an aura of learning and of seeking knowledge, which I find very important because we were there to protest, but we were also there to educate. Um, as Patrick and Cecile said, we were very much there to educate as well as to protest. It was a generally solid environment. Like, for the most part, genuinely, aside from the, like, of course, crowd of I'm not listening to you, I'm not listening to you, I'm
Right.
not listening to you. That is, of course, expected. It was a really good reaction.
I think there's something really important about us not being dependent on, establishment media to get our message across, because we know that we are facing repression towards these established media bureaus. You just see what happened with Al Jazeera, and if
Yep.
so I think it's really important for us to be making these connections. And yeah, just based on my vibe of Twitch, I actually made an account, and there's a game I want to play. It's been on my radar for a while. I'm forgetting the acronym is FNF. It's like Friday
Five Nights at Freddy's. Yeah, sure.
like a music game, right?
It's like a horror game.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking the wrong one. Maybe it's horror. But someone was telling me that there's actually kind of a decent like music and arts community.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this like music game that I'm gonna
Are
have
you
to
talking
find.
about Friday Night Funkin'?
I think
Oh.
something. Yes.
Oh.
So glad you know the acronym. I was
God
like, why am I
bless.
thinking Freddy's? Um,
I'll have to check that out.
yeah, it made me make a Twitch account, and I'm gonna play Friday Night Funkin'.
Hell yeah. Well, that's awesome. I guess my next question is, why BDS? Like, what is BDS, and what is like the historical precedent for like a boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, especially in regards to apartheid?
The point of BDS, right, the strategy, and this was founded by hundreds of organizations in the Palestinian diaspora who wanted to give people a nonviolent means of resisting. It doesn't mean that we don't support all forms of resistance, but strategically, for us in this country, we're not able to like jump in the fight in the sense of like taking up arms. But what we can do is turn off the lever, right? Like we're funding this genocide in this country more than anybody. The genocide would not be able to continue without U.S. Sponsorship, and so it's sort of modeled after the movement to end South African apartheid. Omar Barghouti, a famous leader in the BDS movement, specifically organized to end South African apartheid when he was in college. And so he sort of took that model and was like, well, we need to do the same thing for Palestine. But folks might want to say more about it, but that's how I would sum it up in simple terms, I think.
I did a little research on Chevron and then the BDS movement, and just so that people would know that it has worked, much like the segregation of the black Africans in South Africa. In Israel, the apartheid and segregationist laws favor one ethnic group over the Jewish settlers over Palestinians, denying them any political rights, economic rights. So in South Africa, it after like 10 years of the BDS movement, it started like in the '80s with targeting Shell, Royal Dutch Shell. The economic pressure from not just the Shell but other companies wouldn't even go to South Africa or wouldn't even buy any of their products. After 10 years, the apartheid laws were repealed, and South Africans were able to vote and elected, Nelson Mandela.
I was a campus organizer for, divestment 4 years ago. And even in the last 4 years, we saw at the encampment just this heightened police presence and these heightened crackdowns, and they're just getting more and more active. So I think to combat that despair, making clear to people that, like, even if there's crackdowns on avenues towards protesting on campuses, like, people are still finding ways to do this work in communities and especially do this work against corporations. And then on just the history of BDS, my dad was actually a BDS organizer against South African apartheid in the 80s. So I always grew up on those stories. And one thing that he really communicated to me, and I have always felt was really important with this BDS movement, is that is a very clear way to elevate the Palestinian voice, and as it was in the 80s, the South African voice. The BDS movement is really specific about not having, there's like a graphic I love where it has like a lot of different dots and people like going for all these different targets. And BDS is so clear about no, we need to choose these shared targets and just like surround on all sides. And that is one of, I think, the best things about the BDS movement is that A, it is very clear a way we can support a unified Palestinian voice and the targets that they choose.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to say really quickly too, the reason why the police crackdown is so heavy on campuses is because they know that we're a threat. They know that this will work if we win. And it is a matter of time before we win. We just have to keep organizing.
I would also like to add, if possible, as a college campus organizer, to Sparrow's point, we hold immense economic power, especially, I'm assuming that the audience is American.
It's a good variety, but yeah.
In this case, to all the variety, I love you, specifically to any Americans in the audience. Or people residing in the United States who have United States dollar purchasing power. The American dollar holds a lot of power. We have direct investments, which might be we're giving money straight to the IDF, just bam, 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 direct to you. We're giving money direct to defense contractors, bam, direct to you. Or we have indirect investments, where we're putting money into other institutions, other organizations, other groups that are also funding the apartheid system, in this case, the Israeli apartheid system. And I'm going to be so for real with you. The state of Israel is very small. It is so small. And the amount of money, bombs, weapons, arms that it is producing is absolutely not sustainable for it without money from outside sources. We are those outside sources.
Yep.
But fortunately, we know that we are those outside sources and we have the power to change that. So we, as consumers, as people who are purchasing things, as people who are against our will feeding this economy because we have to survive, we are choosing to say no in targeted ways because there are so many people. Like just in the United States, in the whole world, there are so many people. VBS has targets, specific targets, and so many of the people who are caring about Palestine, who care about BDS, are engaging in the actions, in the boycotting actions that BDS is suggesting. And so many of us hitting these very specific targets, and I'm going to be so for real with you. BDS does not have a lot of targets listed officially. It has honestly very few targets, and they're big, big targets. So many of us hitting those very few targets are a lot of hits That's a lot of money that's not going in them. And that means that's a lot of money that's not going to the state of Israel, which means it's a lot of money that's not going to the ongoing genocide of the Palestinians. It's a way for us to say, this money that I could use for something else, or I could save, or I could donate, I could do something else, it's not going there. The money that I'm paying for my institution of higher education, I don't want it to go to weapons manufacturers. I don't want it to go to people who are funding the state of Israel, who are complicit in funding the genocide in Gaza, who are complicit in funding the genocide of, honestly, any other people all around the globe. Because the reality is, they're all connected. They're all connected because they are all fundamentally imperialist and capitalist genocides and oppressions. And we don't want our money going to that. And that is part of the reason why BDS is so effective, because we're funding this. We can stop. Like our government, yes, but we're also funding our government. Like we ultimately are funding these things. And we choose to say no.
Yeah, that's great. I know you can't see me, but I'm breaking my neck nodding along to all this absolute fire that you're saying. So I kind of do want to talk about how has it been for all of you to like organize for Palestine since October? I know I've been documenting a lot of what's going on at UCLA and participating in the encampment there. And in general, like what kind of like repression have you guys faced? I know BDS is being targeted kind of like nationwide as like a form of protest, which is absurd. But if you guys have any stories in particular that you'd like to share about the repression that you faced organizing against the apartheid.
Yeah, I mean, we were all there for that week. Like some people were there, like a lot more, way more days than me. We've been harassed, from even in like regular protests, like people like rev their engine, like they're gonna like run us over. One guy, he came out and he was like, yelling calling us terrorists, and then as he's walking away, he yells "White Power,"
Oh,
which is like, wait a minute, who's the terrorist? Like who's I don't know. That was like interesting, like side note. But as far as the encampment, like it was you saw fascism like right in your face. Strongest display of impunity, and they haven't even filed charges like yet.
yeah.
So it's like it's really bizarre how that system can work with their only intent was to punishment by cop. It seems it wasn't
Yep.
to
It was pure terror on us students.
once it was silenced, it was like, oh, they were just some dangerous, uninformed people. When actually we were very informed of what the system is doing and how the system is complicit, keeping the colonialism, the oppression, the exploitation of indigenous cultures, indigenous people, indigenous lands. That's what they didn't want to talk about, and that's what they succeeded in at least temporarily silencing us.
I kind of want to jump off that point that Patrick was making about the importance of community, because I think witnessing this genocide, it is a lot of sort of secondary trauma, just, having our eyes on it. And so, being in community with people who are equally disgusted and enraged by it, for me, is what's keeping me safe, because it's difficult to talk about it at work. A lot of people at work don't want to talk about it, don't care. And so having that community of people who, if you're American, you grew up learning about the Holocaust, and you grew up asking the question, how come how was this possible? Why did no one stop it? I really sort of like live by that credo that, if you ask yourself what you would have done to stop the Holocaust when it was happening, you're doing it now. And it's our duty to fight this. No two communities in this country are more surveilled than Black activists and Muslims. And BDS in particular is specifically very targeted for surveillance as well. It proves that they know that we are a threat. When we're dangerous to the status quo, right?
Yeah.
Which is why they need to interrupt us, or they want to interrupt us. A lot of universities in the U.S. have shut all of their partnerships with Israeli universities, and so now you have all these people in Israel miserably decrying the fact that they can't have an internationally platformed education. It's basically just trapped getting this very sort of like modular Israel only education. This cultural isolation is necessary, but people who have the ability to leave Israel are leaving because they're like, what country is this?
Yep.
Which is great. That's what we want. And we just have to kind of take them down one notch at a time until it just becomes impossible to be an Israeli. And that's how we free Palestine. If you're in a union, or if you know folks who are in union, and they're actually organizing for Palestine in any kind of way, these are the kinds of things that you can maybe try to get your workplace to sign the pledge to, like if you have fleet vehicles in your union, that they won't use Chevron gas, or they won't buy HP computers for your office. That sort of thing is really powerful because it's not just an individual boycott, but you're actually sort of wielding the power to exercise more power for bigger size boycotts,
If I may return to your question, and tie them back into these points that Patrick and Cecile have made about our protests around specifically reactions and repression and violence at the hands of the government, the state, the police, etc. I think we in San Diego, or I in San Diego, I should say, we're not getting the same kinds of absurd, disproportionate violence that is happening to our friends and comrades, and the repression isn't working as it should not. So that it's not even repression, it's attempted repression.
Yeah.
And they're failing miserably. Much love to our friends and comrades in LA, especially the people at UCLA who are being hit with like these horrible UC sanctions. The UCs, if I may go off on a tangent,
Go off.
the UCs have just established a new set of rules for a conduct for their students. And among them are a set of restrictions on forms of expression that restricts time that forms of expression are allowed on campus, amount of people who are permitted to
75.
express in a group. It's less than 75. Otherwise, you have to like warn the UCs, basically warn the chancellor of the school, which is ludicrous. Unless it's a walkout. So I hope to see many more walkouts. So much love to our friends in the UCs, especially from the college world, especially to the UCLA students who are so near to us but are getting so brutalized. And speaking of, at the UCSD encampment, there were snipers on the roof of the Student Health and Wellness building. So if you're asking about reactions and in attempted repressions, that's one. During one of our BDS protests against HP, there were snipers with their guns pointed at us. And
that was terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Honestly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure you saw, but
it's atrocious.
Yeah.
But thankfully in San Diego, we have not been brutalized nearly as much. This isn't a thankfully situation. Actually, no.
Right.
This is not a thankfully situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to interrupt for a second, I wanted to highlight one aspect that I think we haven't touched on yet, is that we're kind of uniquely positioned in San Diego as one of the only cities in the nation with a civilian oversight board of the police. So some of the responses to the encampment have been going towards talking to the civilian oversight of the police board, and San Diego is one of the only places with that. And I do believe that is one of the reasons we're seeing less just like outright police violence. But there was still chemical attacks on the encampment when it was cleared.
That vigilante violence that was going on at UCLA from those people that were calling themselves, defenders of Israel or Zionists or whatever, it did expose, I think, Zionism, the lie of sort of progressive Zionism, right? And it's the people who are aligned with fascism, people who are aligned with white supremacy, who ally themselves with the Zionists. And the cops and the fash go hand in hand. The cops are always going to defend those fascists, whether it's white supremacists, Zionists.
Hopefully we can get this on the desk of some Twitch staff and raise some hell and make it so that they make the very easy decision of just not partnering with genocide enablers. It really isn't hard. In fact, it's almost like a non-action. Like, we're asking you to refrain from action. We're not even asking you to do action. So hopefully it should be really easy, right?
Don't embarrass yourselves next year at TwitchCon. Don't do
exactly.
it.
Exactly. Let's just keep this pressure on all week long and make sure that everybody on Twitch knows that this kind of behavior is not acceptable, and we can fight back.
Brett,
So-
thank you so much for lending us your time and your mic, and thank you to all the chatters for tuning in and just for supporting the movement. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you all. There's a lot of people clapping in the chat right now, so we really appreciate you. Solidarity, keep fighting. All right. What a good ass convo. Thank you all for hanging out for that. Appreciate you all. Please go sign the petition if you can. If you haven't seen it already, it's pinned in the chat. It's very easy. Just log in with your Twitch account, drop a vote. Just click vote. Yes, I support this. And then if you want, leave a comment, because I think honestly, seeing Twitch seeing all the comments is almost more impactful than just like a number. You know what I mean? So thank you very much. Thank you.